Hi, I'm Lance Lambert. Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Vehicle Show. We are in Poulsbo, Washington, visiting the Dock Street Garage. This is a great facility full of a lot of great cars. So I'm going to do what we do every week. We're going to take a look at those cars. We're going to meet the owner. We're going to hear a little bit of music, have a great time. So come on in. Let's take a look at the collection. I am with Tanya and Ed Johnson. They are the owners of the Dock Street Garage. This is amazing. Thank you for having us out here today.
Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Yeah. How'd this come about?
It's kind of a bad habit, run astray. We started out with one car, and then it grew to two, and pretty soon, I don't know what the cars were doing, but we ended up with a lot of them. And unfortunately, we didn't have any place to keep them. And the weather was starting to take its toll, and we made a decision to build a building to put them in.
This is not just a building. It's amazing what you've done here with the corrugated metal on the inside and the display cases and the tile floor and the music, and just everything is in here. This is pretty much a dream garage.
It was our dream. We started on it. People came in and put up the pole building, and all they did was put in the pad, the building, the roof, and sheathed the sides, and we took it from there. And
you're saying we, Tanya, were you out here with hammer and nail, or are you out here with fresh coffee and sandwiches?
Coffee and donuts.
Yeah, I do the coffee and the sandwiches.
Very important part of garage building.
Yeah.
The neon in here, I've been here before. I wrote an article for Garage Style magazine about this facility, and when I came to look at it, it was, boy, we got to film this. And the first thing when I walked in here is the neon. I love neon, but what you've done with placing the manufacturer of the car in neon behind the cars, I've never seen that done before. That's really neat. Well,
you know, a lot of people that come, usually with somebody that knows cars, don't know the cars. So what we tried to do was to identify the car and the make, and in the cases we have some information about those cars and that particular model year and any awards it may have won. And we've had a lot of positive comments from people that they appreciate that because it lets them appreciate what's here.
Well, let's take a look at some of the cars that you have here.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Viewers know how much I like orphan cars, and what a supreme example, a 55 Kaiser. How did this come into your collection?
Actually, this one I looked for. I wanted a 55 Kaiser. I knew that was their last year of production. I joined the Kaiser Club. I got a list of everybody that owned a 55 two-door. That was important to me. And I got a list of probably 30, 40 people that supposedly had a two-door. And I started contacting them and said, you know, I'm looking for a car like that. Anyway, I got some responses and boiled down to two cars. This one, which was in Canada, and one that was in the East Coast. This looked to be a much nicer car. And I talked to the gentleman. He was interested in selling it. Came up with a price. He brought the car down here to Poulsbo to deliver it. And he was in Canada, so the car was registered in Canada, and I had to go through customs with it. And customs said, well, that'll be $300 and some. And I said, for what? He said, well, you're importing a German car. I said, would you go out to the car with me right now? This is made in the USA. And oh my goodness. He says, well, good thing you noticed because you'd have never got your money back. So here I have it. And then, interestingly enough, the guy called me a couple months ago and indicated he might like to repurchase it, but that's not going to happen.
No deal.
No.
54 and 5 Kaisers, very similar, correct?
There were only 44 of these made, and there's a long story why they do that, but the only difference between a 54 and a 55 is the hood ornament. So that was what they did to make it different, and all you got to do is buy a hood ornament and you can make your 54 into a 55. Now the serial numbers, of course, would...
I don't know much about the mechanics on a 55 Kaiser. Is it a flathead 6 in there? What's going on?
Yeah, it's an interesting car. Kaiser was the only 55 car that did not have a V8 engine available. They had the flathead 6. And they had struck a deal with Oldsmobile to put Oldsmobile V8s in them, but the V8 plant burnt down, and the deal fell through. So Kaiser at the last minute in late '54 put a supercharger on their Flathead 6, which raised the horsepower from 115 to 140. And that 140 was kind of at the bottom end of the V8s in 1955, and it's quite peppy considering it's a 6-cylinder car.
If somebody was trying to find a supercharger for a 55 Kaiser 6, I bet that's a difficult piece to find.
On contraire,
Yeah.
actually, it's the same supercharger that they used in the Thunderbirds.
Ah.
It's the same supercharger they used in the Studebakers, and they are quite plentiful, and they're not too expensive.
Uh-huh. To think what could have been a 55 Olds V8 in one of these, that's pretty exciting.
I think it would have been a very peppy car.
Say again, how many of these did they make?
44 two-door 55 Manhattans, and they made a couple hundred of the four-doors.
So only 44 of these. Wow, this is a rare car.
I think there's about 6 left in the registry. So
And this is probably maybe the nicest one.
I think so.
Well, speaking of nice, you have a car down the line here. Let's take a look at that.
All right.
Ed, Lincolns are thought of as luxury cars, but this one with the red and black exterior and red and black interior looks kind of hot roddy. Tell us about this one.
This was an unusual color combination with the black top. They were advertised quite a bit with this color and a white top and red and white interior. This was a bad year for Lincoln. This is the 4th year they were using this body style. It didn't have a wraparound windshield. Got a push-button starter. It's got a 6-volt ignition. They were outsold by all the other luxury car makers, including Packard over here. But they did an excellent job on restyling the car, which is always difficult when it's been out for 3 years, 4 years. And the car is relatively, I want to say, rare because they didn't sell a lot. And of course, not a lot of them survived. But this was the first year with the Ford transmission, so they had a little bit to sell.
Was the percentage of them 2 doors much significantly smaller than 4 doors? I always think of 4 doors when it comes to Lincolns.
They didn't have a big offering. They had a 4-door, they had a 2-door, and they had a convertible. And the 2-door hardtop was very popular, but I think you're right, the 4 doors outsold them.
When you compare this to another Ford product, a 55 Ford, do you know you're in a much more luxurious car, or is it mainly feel like a 55 Ford with different fenders on it?
No, I have a 55 Ford and a 55 Mercury, and you definitely feel like you're driving a bigger, heavier car. I know when we take them apart and put them together, you can tell the difference in the construction. You know, they might use twice as many bolts to hold something on than say, the Ford car.
Do you have a preference for, are you a Ford guy? I mean, you have a mix in here, but a lot of Ford products in here. Is that where your heart is, or is your heart wherever what side of the bed you got up and how big your checkbook is that day?
No, you know, when I grew up, and perhaps when you grew up, you were a Ford family, or you were a Chevy family, or Mopar, and it's genetic. And I got the gene, and I feel guilty driving anything but a Ford product.
Well, I was a Nash family, so...
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're not the first to say that. Power plant on this, much significantly bigger than the Ford, or...?
Yeah, it's a big V8. This is the road racing Lincolns of the 50s. They were taking all the Mexican road races. Same basic engine, and quite powerful. And kind of complicated with all the heating and whatnot they have.
Well, you made reference to the Packard next door. Let's take a look at that.
Okay.
Love Packards, love 55 Packards. This is a very pretty one. Tell us about it.
This is a little bit of an unusual car also. 55 Packard came out with a totally restyled car. Even though it was still an old body style, they did a remarkable job on restyling it. It's their first V8 engine, 352 cubic inches. It's got no springs anywhere. It's torsion level. Torsion bars level the car. Somebody gets in, the car comes up. Somebody gets out, the car goes down. You go around the corner, the car flattens out. Very, very unique system. But Packard didn't have, this says Caribbean, but the Packard Caribbean was only offered in convertibles. And it was only had 500 of them made. People would come into the showroom to see the Packards, and typically their customer base was an older set, And they'd see the Caribbean convertible, but they didn't want a convertible because they're too breezy and all this and that. So they said, I want a hardtop. And they said, well, we don't have any hardtops. It got to be such a fuss that Jim Nance, the president of Packard, wrote a letter to the dealers saying, put the Caribbean trim on the 400, not number, that's the body style, the 400. Put the trim on, put the twin antennas on, give them whatever they want, tell them next year we're going to have hardtops. Well, yeah, next year they had 250 hardtops, 250 convertibles. They were selling the Caribbeans in 3-4 months of the year. They were gone. So they missed a bet there, I think, to probably save the line. This is a stock 400, except for the side trim and the antennas. Everything else is the same as it would have been on a 400.
In 55 and 56, of course, Packard was a sinking ship at that time. Yeah. Was this body style a real shot in the arm to the sales, or did they just still keep going downhill?
They outsold Lincoln that year.
Oh, okay.
And they actually made a profit in 1955. So they had a little edge on it, and it went away.
Does this have the seats that come out and flip around?
That was 1956. The seats were reversible. Okay. You had leather on one side, cloth on the other.
The winter-summer interior.
Yeah.
I think they're every bit as pretty as the big 3 cars that were coming out that year, but did they have such an old people persona that people that might have thought they were pretty neat just didn't even take a look at them?
Packard offered their Clipper line, which was a lower cost line. In fact, it didn't have the torsion suspension, and that was for the people that liked the Packard but couldn't afford the big ones.
So it was still financially step up to do this. Okay. Well, something pretty over there. Let's take a look.
Okay.
48 DeSoto convertible. This is really a flashy car. Tell us about this.
This is TANYA's car, one of them, and when we moved here, there was a 48 DeSoto coupe down the street for sale, and she bought it, and then we bought a parts car. We had 2 48 DeSoto coupes that I was going to make into a nice one for her birthday. I didn't quite get there, and I spotted this one in Hemmings, and I said, I'll make you a deal, I'll buy you this convertible instead of the coupes. She said, I want the coupes. No, she didn't. She said, I want that convertible. It was in Pennsylvania. We went and looked at it, and as you can see, it's a beautiful car, and TANYA drives it a lot in parades and enjoys it, and probably a pretty good buy at the time.
She was willing to make that sacrifice to settle for a convertible.
It's the kind of woman she is.
That's a good woman, yeah. Tell us about this. This is all obviously the average Joe didn't buy this. I don't think this was a little bit of an upscale rig. The car companies used to have 5 model lines so they could move people up as they bought their 5 cars in their lifetime. This was pretty much in the middle, and DeSoto was doing very well. As all the Chrysler cars, in fact, all the manufacturers, after the war, they just went into the tooling that they used in 42, changed it a little bit, and started making cars. And this is basically your 42 styling, and it ran in 46, 47, 48. The car has the fluid drive, which is a kind of a type of automatic transmission, but it has a clutch. So it was a little easier to drive than a standard transmission, but not as nice as a fully automatic, which was just starting to come out then. We've looked at some of your cars. We're going to look at some more, but do you have, when you come in here in the morning and turn the lights on and see all your friends in here, all the cars in here that are your friends, do you have a favorite? Is there a favorite child here, or does that change weekly? What really flips your switch?
I really can't have a favorite because they get jealous.
They do, yeah.
No, my favorite is usually the one I'm driving. Each of them is a little bit different. It brings back different memories, and we try to drive all the cars every year. Sometimes we're more successful than other times.
You mentioned the parade. These cars some of the older cars tend to overheat a little bit, I think. What's the downside of having something like this?
We take the cars, some of them, on pretty long trips, 600-700 miles. That Packard that we looked at, got a lot of miles on it like that. This one runs like a charm. You're correct, in the parades sometimes they tend to overheat, so we try to find parades that are downhill.
Another DeSoto, another convertible. You must have a spot in your heart for DeSoto convertibles.
I don't, but Tanya does.
TANYA again.
This is her car also. We went to, I believe it was a 1996 DeSoto National in Sacramento, and this car was there and took a first place. And we were talking to the owner, who mentioned that it was for sale, and Tanya got out her checkbook. So I drove it home from California, and it's been a big part of our car collection ever since. I don't like working on Chryslers.
Because?
Everything's different than the Fords, and the brakes in particular on this have been a real challenge, but I think we finally have them working.
Mechanically, for Fords and Chevys, there was a big change from 55 to 56. Is that the same case with Chrysler products?
Absolutely. This was the beginning of what they call the forward look. All their cars had great style, bright colors. 55 they have the shift on the automatic transmission on the dash. 56 they went to the push buttons. 56 they began the fins. So yeah, this was a big change.
And that shifter on the 55 that comes out of the dash, was it actually, they're afraid people are going to be harpooned on that thing and a wreck. Did that actually happen, or that was just a safety issue that they were concerned about?
They'd have to go through the steering wheel first to get at it, so it really wasn't an issue. I think sometimes people look for things to make the competition look bad.
And the power plant in this?
This is a Hemi. They had two models. This is a Firedome. The bigger one was a Fireflight, and very little difference between them. A lot of people looking at them wouldn't see it, but yeah, this is an early Hemi, and it's quite peppy.
A 55 Merc. You seem to be heavy into Ford products, but also heavy into 55. What's that about?
Well, the 55 first. I have this theory, and I think it could be proven, but the people who were buying these cars, first off, went through the Great Depression. If that wasn't sad enough, they went through World War II. And these people came back home and started businesses and started families, which put a lot of pressure on them. And I think this was building and building and building, because you look at 1955 and there was an explosion of color, chrome, power, never before seen in the automotive industry, and I don't believe has been seen since. These are very, very unique cars. And I was right in the middle of it and very happy to be there. And as far as this car here, an example of what I just said, my dad bought four-door Fords in dull colors all his life, and he traded in his 49 Ford four-door gray for a red 55 Mercury two-door. I was one happy teenager.
I bet you were. Yeah, that was 55 was an exciting year. Big changes. We had the Lincoln earlier, and this was the step you took before the Lincoln. So how in relation to the power output of this compared to a Lincoln, what do we have here?
This is a much faster car because it's a lighter car. But the Lincoln had a bigger engine. This had a 292 in 55, and it was plenty peppy. What's really interesting, typically the top of the line car, this is a Montclair, this is the best of the best Mercury that year, never was the biggest seller. You'd come in to see the Montclair and you'd buy a Monterey or a Custom. But in 55, the Montclair two-door hardtops were the top seller of all the Mercurys. So it was a very, very popular car and well received.
55 and 56 Mercurys look to me like you took a 55 or a 56 Ford to George Barris or to any, Gene Winfield, any of the good customizers back then, and said, make it look really good, and they'd hand you a Merc back. They look like a nice custom work on a 55 or 56 Ford.
Well, you're right. A lot of the customizing that was very, very popular back in the 50s found its way into production. And you see things done on these cars that prior to that would have been a custom car.
One of the most distinctive things about this, and I think it might be peculiar to the Montclair, but maybe not, is the strip on the belt line here, the white and the chrome, and the area where your dad used to stick his arm out the window when they were riding. It seems odd, but it seems to work.
It was unique to the Montclairs, you're correct. There was a lot of aftermarket kits to put on your car that would do that. And in fact, my dad's 55 had a dealer installed. It wasn't quite as nice as this, but it was painted white like that to make it look like a more expensive model than it was.
That I didn't know they did. 58 Edsel Pacer convertible. Of course, everybody knows the Edsel story and how far off the mark Ford didn't hit. But wow, what a flashy car, what a neat car.
Well, I think everybody thinks they know the story.
Oh?
Edsels were actually, and not still are, look, it's a beautiful car. Yeah, the economy was bad when they finally brought it into production, but there were two other factors that played a major role. One, workmanship on them was very bad. They were manufacturing these in the Ford assembly lines and the Mercury assembly lines with the Fords and the Mercurys. The workers didn't like it, the cars did not go together right, and there was a lot of work done after somebody bought one. They'd be taking that back to the dealer for service. So it got a bad name. The big factor, I think, was the fact that Ford did not use their dealer network. Ford Motor Company didn't use their dealer network. They created new dealers for the Edsels. These people didn't necessarily know how a Ford dealership worked. They didn't know about working on Ford cars, and there was a lot of service problems to that. So I think the car would have been successful with a few little changes, and it'd probably be around today.
You didn't go into a Ford dealership to buy an Edsel. You didn't go into a Lincoln Mercury to buy an Edsel. You went into an Edsel dealership to buy an Edsel?
Exactly. And I think it was a big mistake, and I've heard it mentioned many, many times in Edsel get-togethers.
All these cars that you have here, they're pristine show cars, but they didn't all start that way. And I'm not seeing a whole lot of tools around in here. How did they get to this stage?
When I buy the cars, they're in different condition. Some of them are finished and perfect. This is pretty much the way I bought this one. We've done some work on it. It needs some more work. Others are not in such a good condition. This one over here has never been restored, and we're going to do that. I have a garage down below that we work on the cars. In fact, there's two of them in there right now, and we can do pretty much everything. Occasionally we have to send them out. I have a car in the transmission shop right now. But we do most of the work here.
So you're doing the work in your other garage, you're enjoying your display area here, you have your little office area where you can sit down and, I suppose, go on your computer and find parts or pull out your books and go through them looking for things and enjoy your little office space. What, if you had to describe the greatest thing about this garage, what is it?
The people that come to see it. We really enjoy people. We enjoy showing the cars and sharing the space with car clubs, individuals, and in other words, we just like the cars.
Yeah, well, we like the cars, we like the facility. Ed, thank you very much for inviting us to come out here and take a look at your collection. This is absolutely beautiful.
Thank you very much for coming out.
You bet. And thank you for watching the show. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, tune in next time. Until then, bye-bye. But this 55 Lincoln also, it's red with a red and white interior. This is kind of a hot rod Lincoln almost.
I wouldn't say that. It was an unusual color combination. By the way, it's red and black. Do you want to do that over?
Yeah. 46 DeSoto Convertible. This is pretty flashy.
This is a 48 DeSoto Convertible, but it looks just like the 46s.